Okay, I think I'd like to get underway. Welcome everyone to the show this evening. Our subject is Parshas Lech Lecha, naturally, and we're going to once again delve into the very creative thought of Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz, one of the most influential and prominent rabbinic personalities of the 18th century. He died in 1764. He lived in Prague, he lived in Altona, he lived in Metz. He's buried in Altona in Hamburg, actually. We've been studying, I have been studying, and we have together been exploring some of his fascinating thoughts on the Parsha week by week. He's my friend for the year. So we'll start at the beginning. If you've got a chumash with you, I hope you do. So at the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, the expression Lech Lecha is very well known, probably because it is the name of our Parsha. But actually, the Torah uses the expression Lech Lecha in quite a few places. Nevertheless, Rashi considers the usage here to be important. And he says, Lech lecha lahana ascha v'letovascha. Of course, the basis of Rashi's comment is the fact that Torah could have simply said, Lech me'artzecha, go forth from your land, etc. But Lech lecha, go for yourself, connotes that there's some additional value or importance or significance to this journey. Now, the truth is that the Torah uses that expression. It's part of the biblical idiom, shlach lecha, lech lecha, brach lecha. We find lecha, it's just an intensifier, and it's used very frequently. But Rashi nevertheless finds a basis for a drash here, saying, go for yourself. You're going to benefit from this journey. Even though I'm telling you to leave behind your homeland, your birthplace, your father's home, but actually it's going to benefit you. And I'm not telling you where you're going either, by the way. Some unspecified, unidentified future land. And Hashem says, don't worry, I'm going to show you. I'll tell you when to stop walking. But it's for your benefit and for your betterment. There I will make you a great nation. Here you're not going to merit to have children. He was already 75 years old. He had no children. Here you won't have children, but there you will. I will proclaim your nature, that is to say, your accomplishments and your precedent-setting example to the world. All the world will learn about you. That's going to happen on this journey. So Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says that we find the expression Lech Lecha another time in the case of Abraham himself. I wonder who can tell me, if anyone has his microphone on, on what other occasion the Torah says to Abraham, Hashem says to Abraham, Lech Lecha. I'll give you a hint. It refers to another very important and fateful journey. Hashem says to Abraham by that time, Lech Lecha.
Is it the Akedah?
The Akedah, absolutely. Very good. In the case of the Akedah, he says, Lech Lecha el Eretz HaMoriah. Go for yourself to the land of Moriah. And it's interesting there as well. He doesn't tell him exactly what to do. Well, I mean, he does tell him to take his son, but he doesn't know exactly where to go, exactly which mountain. But Lech Lecha el Eretz HaMoriah says the comment of Rashi here applies there as well. So here he says Lahana Ascha for your benefit and for your betterment. So with regard to Escha Osala Goy Gadol, you'll become a great nation. Here in Bavel, you're not going to have children. But there in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, you will. So that part refers to this Lech Lecha. The next Lech Lecha, when it says, I will proclaim your achievements to the world, that of course refers to Akedas Yitzchak. Because there it says Hashem Nisa es Avraham. Now we normally understand the word Nisa from the word Nisayon, which means a test. God tested Abraham. And of course, this is the most difficult of the famous 10 tests. However, the word Nisa can have a different meaning as well, which the Meforshim say, from the word Nes. Nes, which we understand Nes, we use it as a miracle, but the word Nes really means a banner. Litnoseis is to wave something, to hold something aloft. So Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says that Hashem says to Avraham, Lech Lecha, here you're not going to achieve, meaning, well, it says here in Mesopotamia, you're not going to have children. In the land of Israel, you will. But also, Lech Lecha, that your renown, your achievements will become well known to the whole world. That refers to the second example of Lech Lecha. Then the next time he says Lech Lecha, there your prominence and your reputation and your impact will be greatly increased. And it's interesting, it was such a dramatic event that 1,000 years, about 2,000 years later, actually, the Muslims, when Muhammad invented the Islamic religion, and when he wrote the Quran, most of which he plagiarized from other sources, so they took this story, they thought it was such an impressive story that they took it and they distorted it. And instead of Akedas Yitzchak, the Muslims have Akedas Yishmael. And according to them, it was Ishmael, not Yitzchak, who was nearly sacrificed on the altar. I'm just mentioning that because it's an example of how true it is that event in that defining event in the life of Abraham and the life of Yitzchak as well, indeed has catapulted Abraham into eternal superstardom. They even named the Abraham Accords after him as well, which we may have a chance to comment on, if not tonight, then maybe on Shabbos. Okay, that's the first comment I wanted to share with you about Lech Lecha, that it refers also to the next Lech Lecha regarding the renown that Abraham will achieve. So I want to turn now to the dramatic events in the life of Abraham, prior, of course, to Akeres Yitzchak, and it's really the first notable event that the Torah tells us about when he arrives in the land of Canaan, and unfortunately, the famine immediately sets in. So we are looking at chapter 12, verse 12. Avram and Sarai are on their way to Egypt, to Mitzrayim, because of the famine. The famine was intense, and they had to go to Mitzrayim. It makes sense to go to Mitzrayim if there's a famine in Canaan, because Egypt is in a different weather system, although it's nearby in sort of global terms, but it's a completely different weather system. And in particular, the land of Israel, as is known even to this very day, is highly dependent on rainfall, and therefore it's subject to drought and to water shortages. Egypt, at least the part of Egypt which is in the Nile Delta, doesn't have that vulnerability, and therefore from time immemorial, if there's a famine in the land of Canaan, the people would go, as would happen subsequently as well. The people will go. Yitzchak wanted to go. Yaakov did go with his family because of the famine. They went to Mitzrayim. Of course, in that time, in the case of Yaakov, there was a famine even in Egypt. That was, of course, extraordinary. In any case, they're on their way to Mitzrayim. Avraham realizes that Sarai is very beautiful. Perhaps he hadn't noticed that before, or maybe he had noticed it, but he simply realized that now her very beauty, which is a wonderful feature, is now a source of danger. She is putting her own life in peril and his life as well. Okay, you know the story. So if you look in Pasuk Yud Beis, V'haya kiro sacha Mitzrim, when the Egyptians will see you, va'amru, Ishtozos, they'll say, this is his wife. V'hargu sivo sach yichayu, they will kill me, and you they'll keep alive. Imrina achosi at. Therefore, please say that you are my sister. Lamandi tabli ba'avurech, things will go well for me because of you. And then I will live because of you. So that will be a great favor to me. Now, was her life in greater danger because of this ruse? Maybe yes and maybe no. But Abraham seemed to be concerned that these people in Egypt will see a beautiful woman and they will have no hesitation in murdering me in order to seize you. Abraham apparently is concerned that the Egyptians are fastidious about adultery if she's a married woman, but if they kill him, then she's not married anymore, and therefore they weren't too troubled by that. Of course, what's difficult in this is, what about murder? Were they not troubled? Were they not worried about murder? I mean, were they so I don't know, morally refined as to be concerned about adultery, but not concerned about murder? So Rav Yonatan Eibeschutz takes a different tack. And he says that Avram was worried about going to Egypt because he had already established a reputation as an iconoclast. An iconoclast literally is one who smashes the idols, the icons. And according to the well-known Medrash, that's what he did in Ur Kasdim. Nimrod wanted to throw him into the furnace, and he was only saved by miraculous intervention. But even recourse to the Medrash, it is clear that Avraham believed in God. He believed in the one God. He taught people about the one God, and he certainly rejected idolatry. Hi.
Sorry?
He certainly
Hi, is it around?
rejected. He certainly. I wonder if.
Okay, fine. We should call him. I just tell him at home at the moment. Thanks. Bye.
We Abram was concerned that they will, the Egyptians will kill him because he has rejected idolatry, since he has become the crusader against idolatry. So he is liable to death. Now, the same is true for Sarah, because she also rejected idolatry. As we know, Sarah was the life partner of Abraham, not only as a wife, but also as a, kiruv professional or amateur, as the case may be. So Sarah also, of course, rejected idolatry. But Avram's reasoning was the following, that they'll kill me and they'll say he's because he rejects idolatry, therefore we're going to kill him. And they will conveniently grant you clemency. And having done that, because you're single and because they've murdered me, and because you're liable to death and they've only spared your life. So according to the law, and he cites, Eibeschutz cites some Talmudic evidence for this, there's a presumption that they can abuse you and rape you at will. So that is going to be a catastrophic outcome. And therefore, it's better if you say, you are my sister. How is that going to help? So he says, Rabbi says an interesting thing. Avraham was in Egypt with Sarah, and he foresaw in the Masa Avosim and Labanim formula, in which he recognized that his life was a kind of a foreshadowing of the future of Jewish history, that the Egyptians are going to seek to kill the Jewish men and keep the Jewish women alive. Of course, that was the decree in the days of Moshe, and v'kolabas techayun, but the women we'll keep them alive. So Avraham realized that this is the pattern, and therefore he realized that his life was at risk, but her life was not, because they're going to keep the women alive. Moreover, and this I like very much, imina achosi, tell them you're my sister. Why not my cousin or some other relationship, or just say that we're traveling together, or even feign lack of familiarity with one another. Why achosik? So he says because he also foresaw in a prophetic insight, prophetic intuition, that the redemption is going to come through the sister. Which sister brought about the redemption, according to the narrative in Shmos?
Miriam.
Of course, Miriam. We don't know that many sisters, but Miriam we know. Miriam we know very well. So Miriam is the one who waited to see what would happen to Moshe. And Miriam also, according to the Chachamim, according to the sages, Miriam is the one who encouraged her parents even to get back together and to have another child who was the Redeemer. So the redemption came about through the agency of the sister of Miriam. And therefore, he said, that's the best formula. If you say you're my sister, then that's going to be a source of redemption. Now, I want to share with you a really clever idea that he says a few verses later, because this visit to Egypt actually, in the end, although no doubt they had some anxious moments along the way, but in the end, it worked very well, because although she was taken, but Paro was prevented from touching her, from assaulting her, or harming her in any way. And as a result, when they left Egypt sometime later, Rechush Gadol, they went with tzon of akar, chamorim, avadim, shvachos, v'asonos, ugmalim. They went with livestock, with household help, servants, maid servants, and the rest. In fact, it even says when they finally left, Abraham had to travel slowly because he was so weighty with all of his acquisitions. So it actually worked out very well in the end. There's a big problem with this, though. The problem is that I'll tell you the way Yonatan Eibeschutz asks the problem. He says, what is going on here? Avraham, it says, okay, take a look at Pasuk Tezayin, verse 16. Ulavram Heitivura. Paro was beneficent to Avraham because of Sarah, Vayhilo Tzonavakar, etc., etc. How could Avraham take these gifts from Paro? Again, according to the ruse, they think that Avraham is her brother, and Sarah, this dashingly beautiful girl, is a sister. And they've abducted her. They've taken her to the royal harem, and Avraham is going to be enriched because of that. I don't want to be crude, but there's a word for that kind of service that a man might provide in hiring out a female associate. It's called esnan zona. It's the wages of a harlot. Says Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz, how could Avraham? Definitely, he wouldn't take a gift from Paro in that context. This is abhorrent. Besides which, we find later on in our Parsha, Avram gets involved in a regional war. I was going to say skirmish, but it's kind of a world war, the 4 kings and the 5 kings. He gets involved, and as a result of his involvement, he redeems Lot and all of the booty, all the captives, and he comes back, south to Sodom, and the king of Sodom comes out to greet him. And he is evidently, he says explicitly, Tein li hanefesh v'haruchush kach lach. Return to me the souls, meaning my subjects, v'haruchush, and the booty you take, because to the victor go the spoils. What does Avram say to that? Harimosia sadi la'elad yon, I will lift up my hand. I won't take anything michud v'atzrochnal. Shalot tamar ani heshatias Avram, so that you won't say, I, king of Sodom, is the one who made Abraham wealthy. So this is problematic, because if he's so determined, and the Torah elaborates, as I've just indicated, about not taking gifts from the king of Sodom, so you won't say, Ani Ashartis Avram, I made Avram a rich man. It's because of me, because of my beneficence. Then why is he taking gifts from Paro? Says Yonatan Eibeschutz, he didn't take gifts from Paro at all. What happened? It doesn't say he gave him. He says clearly, it doesn't say he gave matanot ulavram. He tiv v'avura. He was good to him. Why was he good to him? He says we have a biblical precedent for this. We have a precedent for a beautiful girl who is taken into the harem of the king, who has a companion or a custodian. And as a result of that, the custodian is elevated. He becomes a royal courtier. He even becomes Mishneh LaMelech. Who is that?
Mordechai.
Of course, Mordechai. Mordechai was Mishneh LaMelech Achashverosh. Why? Because of his close association with Esther. Says Rav Yonatan Eibeschutz, that's the same thing that happened here. Avram was elevated, he became a courtier, became part of the king's court, and therefore he got a salary. And with that's Heitiv Ba'avura. He hired him, he had protexia. It's not that he took handouts, but he had protexia. He got a good job. I'm sure he did a good job, probably got a bonus at the end of the year as well. So with that, Vayhilo, as a result, he was able to acquire all of those acquisitions. Then he has another suggestion as well. He says it could also be that, again, the Torah doesn't say that anyone gave him these. It could be that he acquired that wealth. He had cash or American Express, and he acquired all of those, that merchandise, so the chattels, zon of akar, chamorim, va'avadim, etc. So what's the importance of it? What does the Torah say? What he did with his money? I mean, perhaps he spent it on something else. He bought gold because the markets are crashing around the world. And maybe he bought gold, or maybe he bought other things. Why does the Torah say what he bought with it? The answer is because a short while later he says, Paro says to him, I'm sorry, just before that, Lama Marti, go on. She's your wife, so leave. And it says right away that Avram left from Egypt. Says Rabbi Eibeschutz, the Gemara tells us that Egypt was the source of the best livestock in the entire Middle East. The horses were world famous. I think they still are. I think the queen still gets some horses, Arabian horses. So certainly in antiquity, but not just the horses, but apparently even the livestock and even the chazirim, even the pigs as well. So the Gemara says that they would not export them because, or if they did, they would essentially spay the females first so that they became infertile. The point is, you could not leave Egypt with all of these livestock, etc. You needed a special export license. But because of Avram's connections, he was able to get an export license and he was able to take it all with him. You have that. I don't know whether anyone in this shir has ever been to Arizona, but if you've been to the Sonora Desert, one of Elisheva's favorite places, you've got the famous Saguaro cacti. If you have said those cacti with the arms up like that, you know, you can see them in the westerns. Actually, they only grow in that one place on planet Earth. That's the only place they grow. And they're indigenous and they're protected. You can't take them out. They're protected and they're restricted. You're not allowed to take them. You need a special license to take them. In South Africa, I'm looking to see who's on our shoot tonight. We've got some South Africans. So you probably know that in the southern part of South Africa, there's a town called Oudtshoorn. It's not that far from George, and George is probably the nearest larger town. They cultivate ostriches there. At one time was a source of great wealth. And by the way, there are a lot of Jews in the ostrich business as well. And about maybe 40 or 50 years ago, Israel began to develop an ostrich industry as well, which they still have. And how did they get the ostriches? The answer is they smuggled it out illegally because you're not allowed to export ostriches because they control it very tightly. Anyway, I'm just giving an example. That's what Rabbi Eibeschutz says, that because he had protexia, so he was able to export all of those things without difficulty to take it with him. Okay, we've got just a few minutes left. I don't know who paid close attention to the little promo for this year this evening, but we called it Galus o Gehenna, exile or purgatory. And that's what I'd like to share with you. Very interesting approach to the somewhat cryptic event known as the covenant between the parts. Bris Ben Habesarim. You can find it if you turn to chapter Tesvav 15. So there is a description of this very important event. I emphasize the importance because it foreshadows the future of Jewish history. And in particular, take a look at verse 12. Pasuk Yud Beis. So chapter 15, verse 12. Vayhi hashemesh lavo, the sun began to set. V'tardema nafla al Avram, and slumber fell over Avram. It's a way of saying that he entered a kind of prophetic trance. V'hinei ema chashecha gedol nofelas alav. Darkness and great fear fell upon him. Vayomer la'Avram, and here's the prophetic communication from God. Yadoa teda ki ger yezaracha be'eretz lo lahem. You shall surely know that your descendants will become enslaved or will be strangers in a foreign land, strangers in a strange land. Va'avadum, and they will enslave them. Will oppress them 400 years. And it goes on more about that vision. And also the nation that they serve, I will judge. And then they will emerge with great wealth. So Yonatan Eibeschutz says that like this: the Medrash quotes the Medrash Tanchum in Parashas Pekudah, and the Medrash says that Hashem gave Avram a choice. He gave him Bechira, a kind of devil's dilemma. He allowed him to choose two possible consequences or two types of destiny that may lay in the future of his descendants, to choose either exile or Gehenna, Galus or Gehenna, either Galus and Shibud Malchios, the sort of oppression of these four empires, which our Jewish history actually spans the exile part of it, spans the experience of the subjugation to those four empires, or Gehenna, or his descendants would end up in purgatory. And he was very conflicted about this. As I said, a devil's dilemma. And Hashem encouraged him, he advised him to go for the exile option. But Avram was very worried. He was worried logically. He thought to himself, okay, if I choose Gehenna, then that's it. My descendants will be in purgatory for eternity. That's not an appealing option. If I choose exile, what is exile though? Exile means they'll be thrust into a foreign land. They'll be dispersed. They'll be despised. They'll be oppressed. They will be subject to the most insidious, corrosive influences. It won't take long before they start to follow the ways of their captors, worship idols, and they'll end up in Gehenna as well. So they'll get both. They'll get tartili reusa. They'll end up with misery in this world and perdition in the next world. So that's why Avram was very troubled by this. That's why, according to this approach, the Torah describes he's deep in consternation. So Hashem said to him, Yadoa Teda, you shall surely know that your descendants will be oppressed in a foreign land. But you know what? Even in that foreign land, they will not sell out. They will not succumb. They will not lose their faith. They will not betray their destiny. Yetz'u b'rechush gadol. And where will that place be? Even in Mitzrayim. Egypt, which is Avi Avos Hatuma, that's an expression that he uses. Avi Avos Hatuma, it's the most defiled place of immorality, of degeneracy, of persecution, of immorality, of idolatry. And even in that place, he says, Yilketu kol nitzotzos kedusha. They will collect the sparks of holiness. For those who've been with us over the last months, last year, although actually we only started this year in the summertime after Pesach, Chida several times refers to this doctrine found in the writings of the Ari, the sparks of holiness, to redeem the sparks of holiness. That is the whole purpose of exile. According to this approach, that the positive accomplishment of exile is to collect those sparks of holiness. And he says, even in Mitzrayim, they will do that. And not only that, but they will also acquire mitzvahs like Korban Pesach, like Matzah, like the whole Pesach experience. And Mila, Brit Milah was given to them as well in Mitzrayim. And the receiving of the Torah, all of those gifts, all of that Rechush Gadol, will be a consequence of their subjugation in Egypt. And then he says, as Gam as Agoy Asher Yavodu Dan Anochi, he says, Dan Anochi doesn't refer only to the Egyptians, to those who have oppressed them, but it refers to the Jews themselves who were unworthy. Those who did succumb, or who did pursue even the influences of the surrounding culture. So indeed, they were left behind. So in a way, Hashem says to Abraham, this experience will purge your progeny as well. They'll be oppressed, they'll be persecuted, but then Yetzu b'rechush gadol. And although he doesn't say so explicitly, I think that he's also hinting to the medrash that I saw in Rabbi Bechaya, who's my friend from years ago. I always tell you, you've got to keep in touch with your friends. So Rabbi Bechaya quotes a famous medrash in Bereshis Rabbah. Take a look again with me, please, at Pasuk Yud Beis. V'hinei ema chashecha gedola nofeles alav. Says the medrash, this is an allusion to the four exiles. Ema, he says, refers to Bavel. Fear is Bavel. Chashecha, he says, is Paras Umadai. Gedola is Yavan, because Greece was great. Greece was the word. Greece was a dazzling empire. Nofeles alav zu Edom, the one that comes crashing down upon him, that is Edom. So there is a remez here to all of the four exiles. My friends, I think that we can apply this formula of Mitzrayim, which the Torah tells us explicitly, the mitzvahs that they received, the Matan Torah that came in its wake. I think we can apply it in a similar way to all the 4 exiles. If we think about it, each of those exiles, weighty and painful though they were, but the Jewish people were enriched by them. The Jewish people were steeled by them. The Jewish people not only survived, but continued to thrive throughout those 4 exiles. Talmud Bavli and the accomplishments of even our encounter with Greece as well, the basics, the essentials of philosophy, including Jewish philosophy, have their roots certainly in the Maimonidean tradition, in the Greek thinkers, and so much more as well. Yafta Lakim Leyefes. I don't want to develop this needlessly. And of course, even in our experience in Galus Edom as well, we have picked up the sparks of holiness. We have resisted the blandishments as well as the persecution of our captors, so to speak. And as Rabbi Eibeschutz says here, this was the reassurance to Avram. He was given a devil's dilemma. Hashem encouraged him, advised him, go for the Galus option. Ultimately, we will be redeemed with great wealth, great spiritual achievements. Thank you for listening, and I wish you Shabbat Shalom. If there are any questions or comments, objections, I'm happy to entertain them. I'll just mention also next week, we're doing the same thing at the same time from 8 to 8:30, but then we're doing from 8:30 to 9, a separate special shiur called The Magic of Shabbos, and it's in honor of the Shabbos Project. To be perfectly honest, I may try to draw from the writings of Yonatan Eibeschutz on the subject,